Okay, boys, rock and roll time. Today's lesson, first lesson will be in JKD on the lead straight punch or straight lead. And for those of you that aren't familiar, we use the vertical fist and strike with the three bottom knuckles. Okay, we're still going. So, again, vertical fist, three bottom knuckles. Okay. I'm hoping you can pick up this 30-degree triangle on the floor, because that will illustrate the stance that we use. But I did take a couple of pictures as well that I'll be posting in the post comments section. Okay, so I'll first start with the stance. Rear foot, 90, front foot, 30. So as you can see, the line that dissects the triangle down the center aligns with the center of my rear foot, or the center of my arch. Okay? And this is what we refer to as the closed stance. Of course, this is a bit too narrow, but it just illustrates the shape. I'll have to step back, feel comfortable, a little bit longer than the width of my shoulders, somewhat like an hourglass. Knees bent down, pelvis tucked forward. Okay. Now, the first thing that we'll work on is talking about facets of the kinetic chain of movements. In other words, what are the isolated movements that make up the entire movement? And from the on-guard position, which is actually quite natural, with the arms dangling at the side, simply lift up at the elbows. And sometimes we call this dinosaur arms. And coming towards the center of the body, but not exactly on the center of the body. All right? So you can see my rear hand is slightly higher than my front hand. Okay, and my chin is tucked. Pelvis tucked forward, knees bent, rear heel up. And in the static posture, you could think of the front foot as being flat-footed, but actually, in reality, it's also, the heel is also up off of the floor, so you're using the balls of your feet mainly to have greater mobility and more explosiveness in your movements. That's also called hitting from the toes. Now, the first facet of the kinetic chain is simply the straightening of the arm. Okay? What people call arm punching. Okay? Now, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but there'll be some circumstances where you will just use your arm. One of them is because you're forced to, for space requirements or what have you. And the second one is because you want to control the depth and penetration of your strikes in order to set up subsequent more penetrating and powerful shots. Okay? Which kind of means like using it like a jab. The second aspect is turning the waist. Turning the waist. Okay? Third aspect is turning the base, which would be the rear foot. Okay? The fourth aspect would be using a push-off step or some sort of step, and we're beginning into those variations. But the base one that we usually teach first is the push-off step. Okay? And the push-off step is basically the straightening of your rear leg. And the way I'll illustrate it now is simply by lifting this leg up. But that's not what we do when we push them. So we straighten the rear leg up, but we actually step forward and land heel toe. Okay? That's the push-off step. You can land heel toe, or you can land on the ball of the foot sometimes as well. All right. Now, so that kind of gets into the idea of what the components of the kinetic chain are. There's more to it than that. There's also impulse. Having your fist relaxed, closing, and using tension at the point of penetration, at the point of the hit. Okay? And so the whole sequence of the kinetic chain, even if it's in isolated facets or you link together facets of the kinetic chain in different ways for different reasons, impulse is very important. And it's not just the fist. It's actually tension in other parts of your body. And it's a bit intricate to break down. It's something you almost have to learn yourself or have a number of sessions with someone and kind of work things out. But the impulse is not simply only in the fist, closing of the fist, but the impulse also uses other parts of the body as well. Okay, so it's rather internal. It's rather externally internal. And of course, recoil or retraction. So, when you start out punching, just like with an arm punch, okay, we'll pretty much get into the lesson now, and then I'll kind of walk back through it. But I'm going to do repetitions of 10. And if I were teaching a private lesson, one-on-one in real life, not virtually, then I would, usually do 20 reps with a student. And if you want to get real results, then 100 reps would be the best way to approach this. All right? Now, so I'm just going to do 10 arm punches. But what's going to change now is that I'm going to use retraction and impulse, and also I'm going to use a guarding hand. So there's a lot of controversy about having a guarding hand or not having a guarding hand. And I'll let you guys work that out for yourself. You'll see the way that I do it right now, but there are other variations in regards to how different people use the rear hand as they punch with the lead hand. Okay, so this will just be an arm punch. Arm and waist. Arm, waist, and rear foot turning. Notice that the recoil includes the recoil of the position. What you'll see a lot of people making a mistake of, because they see Bruce do it in the movies, is that. So there's a couple of big mistakes here, but it looks kind of cool. But actually you want to extend and retract in the same movement. Alrighty then. Okay, getting into the push-off step now, and I'll be landing heel-toe. There's the idea of the hand leading the movement so that it's a non-telegraphic punch. Now, it's very difficult to do, and in my opinion, you don't have to do it all the time. And I won't really get into that right now, but we will cover it. Okay, but you can let the hand lead before the foot, hand, foot, foot, which is base, and you can do same time, and you can do after. Same time meaning stepping and punching at the same time, after meaning stepping first and punching secondly. But there's specific reasons why you do it. And again, JKD is kind of taught upside down. You learn the hardest shit first, okay? And the lead straight punch with letting the hand lead the movement, or the hand, foot, foot. Relax, tense, relax sequence. Back to recovery is the way that it's taught, and it's the bread and butter, and it's a signature movement. Okay, so let me work on a few of those now. And Ted will always say, you don't want to make any noise when you step. Okay, cool. All right, so that's the lead straight punch with push-off step. Now, what I want to get into next is using a little bit of different types of footwork. Okay. With the first one being just lifting up and setting down the feet. Still with the hand, foot, foot sequence. So basically it's something like this. You just lift up and set down. Now, there will be times when you keep your back perfectly straight when you do this. And there'll be times when you'll lean forward a little bit for more penetration. I'm not going for height. I'm just going for free fall and power generation. Okay? The next one we did first, which was the push-off step. Okay? Now, this one will be your longest range use of the punch, but you still don't want it to be way out in no man's land because the chances of landing it are less. However, if you put it into defensive scenario and real usage, and your friend's getting his ass kicked and you need to come across the room in a second with a combination step and hit the guy from behind while he's beating your friend up, then this may be applicable. But it also creates broken rhythm. Okay? And so instead of doing the shift, or the lifting up and setting down, or the push step, okay, basically we do what's called stealing a step. We do the beginning of what would have been a shuffle step, or the beginning of what would have been a burst, okay, and we replace the front foot with the rear. But the way that I teach it is not to fully replace, but to come to the center point of your body, here and here. Okay, so it's a bomb. If you're getting the hang of it, bomb. See, these right now are isolated movements. A lot of this combination footwork that you get into actually deals with attack by combination and progressive indirect attack. But again, we'll be getting into that a little bit later. All right? So, the other way to strike is to strike as you retreat. Now, it doesn't make much sense to push step and hit because you're actually pulling yourself away or pushing yourself away as you strike, so it's kind of a negative hit. But again, never say never. Sometimes you'll do that in the pinch, but the more optimal way to do that is to shuffle retreat. Shuffle retreat. Punch. Punch. Okay, and again, if you look closely, or if you watch this a few times, sometimes you'll see hand, foot, foot sequence, and sometimes you'll see same time. I doubt very much if I did after it during any of those sequences. Okay, but again, it's kind of a fine line sometimes. All right. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to get into, it's too damn hot. I'm going to go naked. Like me titties? Okay. So, yeah, the next thing I'm going to get into is talking about the lead straight a little bit more. We have vertical, we have horizontal, we have shovel, okay, corkscrew, lead straight, shovel. Ted also talked about morphed punches, to where you're just fitting in with the situation and being appropriate. So sometimes it will be diagonal this way. Sometimes your shovel will be like half of the shovel and not turning over all the way like that. And again, to mention the relationship of your head in regards to punching. it's clear that on a vertical fist that there's no reason to move your head left or right. If I'm working linear footwork, as in just staying on the straight center line, so to speak, okay, I would want to do all those variations with my head perfectly still. But if I talk about simultaneous slip hit or elusive head movement as I go in, I would want to, on my corkscrew, slip to the left slightly, and on my shovel, slip to the right side slightly. Okay? But still, you must need to recover with ease. And that is one of the ways that a JKD technique is defined, is by easily launched from the on-guard stance, easily recovered to the on-guard stance. And those techniques end up becoming your primary techniques, whereas ones that make it harder for recovery become your secondary techniques. Okay, the other thing is that the lead straight, the vertical fist, can also go to the body, to the sternum or the solar plexus. The shovel and the corkscrew usually go a little bit lower. And when you go to the body on these, yes, you do move your upper body or head movement to strike to the body. Okay? And again, we're just talking about this way. But once we get into angulation with these tools, you'll see even the greater importance of the idea of this kind of relationship. Okay, makes sense? All righty. Look at the time here. Okay. So, everything we've done so far is isolation. But sometimes isolated training gives the wrong impression to the person watching it from afar, or even the person learning it to begin with, because it's just isolated. A single attack is very rare in fighting. A single attack is just a component of a combination of attacks in reality. So we'll take this thing now in two directions. One direction will be combining the types of footwork and adding some defensive movements. So what I'm talking about now is a hit, snap back, kick. Okay? So simply by lifting up and setting down my feet here, I can also do on the same backward movement. So I go hit, snap back, hit. Now what I did on the return was I actually used a push-off step. Okay? So this is quite stationary, but yet my follow-up at the end was pretty heavy. Okay? So you could kind of call this light, heavy. That was up. Okay, so that was lift up and set down, kind of a stationary shift with a snap back, with just one foot in the air and one foot partially stepping back, then a push off step in to execute the counter movement. Okay? Okay, the next way we'll do it is kind of the opposite. We'll push step in for the advance, and then go into shifting and shifting counter. So push off step, snap back, lift up, set down. You see what I'm talking about? Push off step, snap back, lift up and set down. See what I'm getting at? See what I'm saying? right? And it's, well, doggies. So it's about 95 degrees and 95% humidity. I just have a fan on. The girls and the dogs are hiding in the air conditioning room, giving me a chance to do this. Okay, so we're not going to do any angular movements in part one of this lesson, but let's take a look now at going with the three different straight punches. And by the way, I forgot to mention something as well. F straight, corkscrew, and shovel. We have the two morphs, mini morph and baby morph. And then, but also the corkscrew, of course, is a diagonal strike as well. So the corkscrew can be thrown this way, and the corkscrew can be thrown that way as well. All right? So let's go ahead and work on a three-punch combination. I'll use all. In fact, what I'll do now, instead of doing the push step, push-off step, or lift up and set down shifting type of footwork, I'm going to do quick advance. Quick advance from fencing, modified of course for our use, okay, is this rapid movement here. And this is quick retreat, advance, retreat, advance, retreat, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and go straight shoulder corkscrew with quick advance. So see when you can see my head movements and see when you cannot see my head movement. Probably will always move a little bit. It's kind of when you want to put the oomph into it. When you want to put the oomph into it, kind of add that kinetic link to the chain. So it's not only elusive head movement, but adds to the natural movement of power in your strike. Okay, the next one we'll do is we'll go low, high, middle, low. High, middle, high is what I meant to say. Okay. Okay, the last thing I want to touch upon is recovery. And again, there's some confusion in regards to this as well. Or, it shouldn't be real confusion. Just remember that when you see something isolated, that simply is just isolated. So what I mean is that because I'm isolating my lead straight punch from this beginning posture, that it returns to this beginning posture. Whereas in reality, depending on the situation, it may change. So, if I were to stick and move, okay, which means that I enter and retreat with my movement, and coming back to here is pretty decent. But if I land or I miss, and I end up at a different range, there has to be an adjustment made. Now to a more open stance with both hands up. Okay? See what I'm getting at? So one was to go in and out. The other one was to go in and stay in. Okay? Which may include punch, snap back, punch. Punch, slip, punch. Punch, slip, punch. Punch, bob, and weave, punch, punch. Punch, bob, and weave, punch, punch, punch. So just because you see us isolate the lead straight punch from the longer range, narrow stance, does not mean that it's always done in that way. Woo, doggy. Okay, guys, I think that's going to be about it. I'm not sure of the exact time, but it's pretty close. And again, the grand total of all of this will be 24 hours of training. We may actually attempt to do some of it on Facebook Live as well.